Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is officially 8:32. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully, people will come on and join us for this much needed and important conversation. Uh, I titled this "Blacks, Facts, and Vaccines." You see that? See that alliteration I did right there? The short A sound. Um, but Marilyn and I will talk about this a little bit more later, but this conversation really stemmed from social media, right? Like, as much as we want to hate on social media, there's just so much that could come from it. Actually, our frat brother and frat sister, our frat brother and our sorority sister, the Sparks, I can say their name, right? They don't.
Yeah, they don't mind. They
Uh,
might hurt you if you don't say their name.
Yeah, exactly. You know how Ebony does. But Jamel and Ebony, Jamel posted a comment about getting the vaccine. I don't remember specifically what the question was, but it started such a visceral reaction from folks. Me being one of the first people, like, I don't know about this vaccine, y'all. Like, I don't know. And Ebony came in, and you came in, and just it started up something that was just so interesting to me. And I said, we need some information. Like, clearly there's some information that I don't have, that everybody doesn't have. And I knew that Marilyn Bibbs Freeman, Dr. Freeman, is a specialist in this area. And I'm going to make sure you have more than enough time to introduce yourself. But before we jump into the conversation, I just wanted to say this really quick. One, we're approaching this conversation, Blacks, Facts, and Vaccines, right? From a place of, we're not approaching this from fear, right? There's a lot of fear mongering going on right now. There's a lot of misinformation, but not on purpose, and some on purpose. But we're approaching this from a standpoint of enlightenment, right? Because when fear is introduced to a situation, it causes people to move erratically. It causes people to move off emotion and not out of information, right?
Absolutely.
And for so long, Black folks, like, we haven't had access to information the way we needed to over time. And so I think that's why you see so many of these visceral reactions. But that's one thing. So we're going to move from a place of sharing information. And then two, we have an expert here, and we have Dr. Freeman, that has been working in this field for half of her life.
Yes, pretty much.
Right? And so we're going to make sure that we really get down to the answer. So Marilyn, Dr. Freeman, how do you want me to refer to you today?
Please call me Marilyn. Okay. We're good.
Just making sure, y'all doctors get a little funny style. I just want to make sure. Just introduce yourself to the audience, please, and just let people know who you are, what you do, and just how you're connected to all of this work.
Absolutely. So as Mike indicated, my name is Marilyn Bibbs Freeman. I currently serve as an assistant laboratory director for a laboratory here in Virginia. We do a wide range of different types of testing, including COVID-19 testing. So we have really been on the forefront of the pandemic since just before March, February-ish. We started getting notifications and bulletins in January so that we could start preparing for this to happen. But if you really want to talk about, from a historical perspective, where I'm at, I went to the best university in the United States, James Madison University.
Know what it is.
And I have a bachelor's from JMU in biology. And then from there, actually, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And I learned really quickly that I don't like seeing anybody in pain. So I had to make a quick shift. And when I did that, I said, you know what, I like microbes. I like microbiology, bacteria. Let me do that. So I went to Virginia Commonwealth University and I received a Master's of Science in Medical Technology with a concentration in microbiology. Okay. So that was fun. I spent, I think that's fun.
The only person that will ever say that was fun.
It was, I had a great time. When you're doing your master's, you get to focus on exactly what it is you like doing instead of all of that other stuff. So I left there. I went to work for Johns Hopkins for a couple of years. I've worked for private laboratories. I've worked for government owned, government funded laboratories. So it's been just a smorgasbord of things. But later on in my career, I decided that I wanted to get another degree. And so I decided on public health with a concentration in epidemiology. So that's kind of how I landed where I am right now. But laboratory science is still the thing that I love. And so I do a little bit of both. I'm good with tracking the numbers and tracking the diseases and staying current on the trends. Part of it is because whatever happens out there affects whatever's going on in our laboratory as well. And so it lets me keep a temperature check on what's going to be coming, what's going to be happening, and making sure that I stay educated. So, I mean, that's the 3 minute wrap up of 20 plus years of work and education.
Wow. Do you feel like, hearing your lineup, like starting with biology in undergrad, going to microbiology, and then where you are now, do you feel like your trajectory has like culminated with, like, this is a once in a lifetime thing? We ain't getting no more pandemics, right? I mean, this is like every 100 years. Like,
let's hope not.
do you feel like this is like everything you've done up until this point has like prepared you for this moment?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of different variables that kind of get me to where I'm at. I did a lot of shifting between different types of laboratories for a reason. I think that the common thread is that I wanted to help people. And people always say that, I want to help people because that's the tagline and that's what's honorable. But that's the truth. I come from a family that believed deeply in philanthropy. That is what they taught us. That's what they expected. I can make a very long list of family and friends. An aunt who taught me about what God tells us we need to do as it relates to people and showing them grace and being good and kind to them because that's a reflection of Him. And that's how you get your blessings. And so I can go down a long line of where I get my hustle from. Those are my line sisters, where I get my dedication from. But the ultimate thing is I wanted to help people. And so the job that I do now allows me to do that. I sit on a lot of committees for COVID-19 for various reasons. And so I get to have my voice heard at different levels.
Wow, there's so much to tap into there, because we can go left and talk about how your purpose outside of your profession, like how they align. And I don't know if I've ever heard someone that's a microbiologist or epidemiologist talk about their purpose, like in that sense. But we won't go there yet. If we have time, we'll talk about that, because I think that's really interesting. Okay, so thank you for that, Marilyn. For today's conversation, here's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to dispel the fear, right? We don't want to move in fear, right? We want to give information, real information, right?
Absolutely.
In the same light, we want to acknowledge that fear is real.
Yes.
And that, in particular, talking to and about Black people, like, we have a reason to have some doubts, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So we're going to talk about that. We're not going to shy away from that at all. And then we're going to talk about the vaccine itself, right? I think we know enough we know the impact of COVID, right? We know that there have been over 250,000 people that have passed away. We know that there have been millions of people infected across the world. We know that we're in a series of quarantines and shutdowns over the past 9-10 months. We know that there have been some mismanagement at every level, from federal down to our grocery store, right? Like, we know a lot of those things. And now we're getting to a point where can we see a light at the end of the tunnel? Are we there yet?
We're not there yet. Just to kind of repeat what Dr. Fauci has already said, just within the last couple of days, we're in a surge within a surge. We started seeing cases starting to increase in September with the Labor Day holiday. Then, of course, we had Halloween, and then we had Thanksgiving. And so we were already on that upward swing. And now we have created an additional swing for Thanksgiving. And it's expected that when Christmas comes, it will be more of the same. So we're not at the light. There is no light right now, not here on December 10th at the end of the tunnel. But we're watching it closely. I've heard everything from please tell me why, this is happening. Why do you want to be involved in a vaccine to you took a vaccine, you're going to die. So it's just been all over the place. And I just feel like we need to start being responsible for each other, for our communities, and just giving great information so that you can still ultimately, at the end of the day, make your own choice. That's what I want people to do. But I want you to do it from a place of knowing and going forward.
Right. So I did a little bit of research. I just looked on the CDC's website before we talked. We've had some conversations prior to the meeting, to having this conversation, and I was looking at the numbers, and you tell me if, see there's a lag in information. You tell me what you know, if I'm seeing what is right? So on the CDC website, it talks about, of course, my website, so I'm looking at the cases by age group, and then I'm looking at the deaths by age group. I'm looking at the cases by race, and I'm looking at the cases by gender, and the death rates as well. And I don't want to be morbid. We just want to give good information, right? And so the reason why we think it's important to really talk about this with Black folks is because I'm looking at the list. It says that Black people account for 13.8% of the cases of COVID. Of the cases, about 13.8%, but account for 18.2% of the deaths. That's a 5% of, going from 5 million cases. The data is from 5 million cases, 5.7, and the death data is from 161,000, knowing that, there's a little gap there. What does that stat say? That we're getting it at a lower rate than, let's say, in comparison to Hispanics and Latinos, but we're dying at a higher rate by almost 5%.
And then what you also have to take into consideration is that we make up a smaller percentage of the population. So, those rates mean something a little different because the number of people that are African American in the US is much smaller than the number of people, even now lately in the Hispanic culture. Sometimes we're being outnumbered in certain states and certain areas. So, I think what it's really telling you is that there are disparities against particularly African Americans. And that's where we need to start being sure that we're educating our community knows how to move forward. What's fact, what's fiction, what can help, what won't.
Okay. And just I think at this point, we're so far into COVID being a real thing for us. I think you, of course, know what the disparities are. I read and seen and talked about it in different cases. But can you talk about what those disparities are quickly? Just what makes those, why are the Black numbers so much higher than other deaths, so much higher than other ethnicities?
So, the short answer to that, because that's a very big question, is that it's systemic, right? I remember when maybe about April or so, on all of the news stations, it said, breaking news, African Americans are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Yeah. And I'm sitting there and I look at my husband and I say, where's the breaking news? African Americans are disproportionately affected by almost every disease. And so this was, in my opinion, this was to be expected. It was not breaking news. But it becomes systemic. It becomes the lack of trust in the healthcare system, which is warranted. I mean, we can bring up Tuskegee, that's come up from everybody. We can bring up Henrietta Lacks, from just the medical community. But there are other things. There is psychological torture. There are lots of different things that we can point to. But it's systemic. And so when you say that becomes bigger. There becomes questions about finances. That becomes questions about access to care. Are the things available where we need them to be? You have to have larger conversations about equity. And it's just a very big question to try to cover in the short amount of time that we have here. but it's systemic. There will be no magic bullet for us to suddenly, or magic pill for us to suddenly take and then say, okay, now we're all on an even playing field. But what we need to try to do is get there with our actions and with our behaviors and using our knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Marilyn, my background is in education, and it's interesting because folks always act surprised when we see education data for Black students and Latino students, like, oh my gosh, we got to change the system. And it's the same, like the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And it's never a surprise for me, but when it's presented like, oh, graduation rates are falling, like, yeah, of course they are, because people don't have places to live, because people don't have access to internet or whatever it may be. So thank you for that. A lot of that is parallel across the systems that we work in. Okay, vaccine time.
Vaccine time.
The vaccine, I just saw breaking news. Pfizer did something a few minutes ago. I don't know if it's another step in the vaccine becoming a reality for us here in the US. Talk to us about, like, what is a vaccine? Like, seriously, what does it do? How is the COVID vaccine different from the flu vaccine or taking cold medicine, whatever it might be?
So let's step back and just take a look at a simple way of explaining what does your body do whenever you get sick or whenever you take a vaccine. What you're trying to trigger your body to do is create antibodies, a chemical in your blood that if it sees something foreign, it's going to go attack it and clear it from you so that you can do better, right?
Okay.
So you have two ways that you can have that happen. You can get the disease naturally, and your body will go through that process. Or in the case of vaccines, you can be given something artificial to boost your body and tell it to do the same thing. So you're kind of tricking your immune system into thinking that something foreign is invading, but it's really not. And so the goal of the vaccine is to get you to that protection level with the antibodies in your blood so that you can face something should you meet it or be exposed to it later on. So that's really kind of the quick rundown of what a vaccine is. I think it's just important for people to know that the science behind vaccine development right now, as it relates to COVID-19, the vaccine development itself is not new. What's new is the virus. The platforms that we're using in order to create the vaccine are better technology than what we've seen in the past, and we're able to do it more quickly. I'm not here to say whether I think it's being done more safely or less safely, but what I do know is that it's being done more quickly, but in the same manner as previous vaccines were made. So again, the technology is not new. The science isn't new. What's new is the virus. And so we've now taken this new virus and incorporated it into our older systems, created a vaccine, and the FDA here in the US has approved at least one, and I believe today a second with Pfizer, which is probably the breaking news that you're seeing. I haven't seen it yet. I've been working on it.
You got things to do.
But there'll be a second one soon. And what that's saying is we have reviewed this data and we don't find any reason why this should be significantly harmful to you. And when you look at the risk of catching COVID-19 and what may come with that, leading possibly up to death for some, versus the few reactions that may occur with getting the vaccine, it becomes a conversation about what is the greater risk. The Moderna vaccine, which was the first one released and created in partnership with NIH, and actually had an African-American woman on the development team.
I read that today.
Right? Miss Kizzy Corbett. They were on that team and they created it. They have a vaccine that had 0 significant adverse events. None. 0. Now, that doesn't mean that people didn't get a little sniffle, get a small fever, have some pain at the site. That's not what's considered an adverse event. That is expected. It's your body's response to having something foreign. And that's what it does. So, we have a second vaccine that's looking really good that's being given in the UK now from Pfizer, eventually will be given here. And then here in the US, we're preparing our rollout and our distribution for vaccine as well. So.
Okay. So that's a lot of information. And I want to, there were a lot of things that you were saying stemmed to like rumors and old wives' tales and like things that we've heard about vaccine. Like, oh, when you get the flu vaccine, you know they're gonna give you the flu, right? Like, which, yeah, okay, you could address that. And you know, a lot of people that I know that are smart people, these aren't conspiracy theorists, these are people that are saying when you get this COVID vaccine, they're gonna give you COVID. And I don't want to die, like you said earlier. I mean, these are, you know, it sounds like it's funny, but these are people's real fears. How, like, what are the social implications? Like, how do we socially translate like what you said to people around the way, like our friends, like people that we know, people that we don't, that have such little trust in anything that's like formal or conventional?
So
what do you
we
think?
just got to acknowledge it, right? We got to put it on Front Street and say, you know what has been done in the past was horrible. It was wretched. It shouldn't happen to anybody, and it shouldn't happen again. But I think we have to take a little bit of good from that. And I know that sounds crazy, but hear me out. You know, once the exposure for the Tuskegee experiments came to light, one of the things done in the late 1970s, 1980s was the Belmont Report. And the Belmont Report indicated that you gave protections to people who are human subjects for research, right? Okay. And so now from the Belmont Report and human protection, what we have are internal review boards. And so if I'm talking to somebody from around the way, what I'm going to tell you is that there's oversight. There's someone looking over someone's shoulder, who's looking over someone's shoulder, who's looking over someone's shoulder. And so please know that when those other things were happening, that level of checks and balances just wasn't there. Okay. Yeah. Late 70s, 80s, we have a different system going on. In addition to that, once these vaccines are being developed and tested, it's not the company alone that's looking at this data. If you look, you'll see Moderna and NIH working in partnership to create the vaccine, but they have a completely external review board that will review the data from the vaccines, determine it's good, it's bad, it's harmful, it's safe, send it back to the company for the company to do some final analysis. And then it goes over to the FDA, or here in the United States, that's kind of the system. It goes over to the FDA. The FDA takes that, we're now at 3 looks for checks and balances. And so they take a last look. They not only look at the safety of the vaccine itself, but how you plan to market it, how you plan to educate people about it, the tools you're going to use to give it, the storage of the item, and whether that can be accomplished. Is it reasonable to be able to say these can be given in the amount of time that they can be given in? So what I would want people to understand is that there are now checks and balances that did not exist before. Is it perfect? Are there loopholes? Yes. With everything, though. That is with everything. But I would want them to know that at least there have been attempts to try and right the wrongs of what was done in the past.
Yeah. Do you see a situation where, because I mean we've never seen anything like this, where there are 5 million people that have been infected to almost 300,000 people. Do you see a situation where the vaccine becomes mandated? Like, are there mandated vaccines, right? Like measles,
mandates to a certain extent, because you can get a religious exemption and various reasons. I honestly can't speak to whether they will or whether they won't mandate. I really don't have a good vision on that. There hasn't been the conversations in any of the circles that I've been in currently. But as with anything, I think people need to be prepared for anything can happen and anything can change. So, I don't know is the answer actually to that. Will they mandate it? No idea.
Okay. All right. Where do you suggest? Okay. I'm trying to think through this question. We've seen what COVID is doing and what COVID has done. We are all, because you scared the hell out of me just now and said, we haven't seen the light yet. I thought we were seeing the light, but we're inside. What'd you say? The vortex? We're inside the vortex, in the vortex twice, right?
The surge of the surge.
The surge of the surge. So we're going to have to make some decisions. The vaccine, they're saying, is going to be available 2 to 3 weeks, a month, something like that. It's going to go to older folks first. As we start to make decisions, you know, in the Black community, we have several factors that would move us to the front of the line. What should people be thinking about if they get the opportunity to take this vaccine or get this vaccine? How do they make this decision?
I think they should be looking at, you know, the safety, the real numbers for the safety. Are we just afraid because that's what we've heard and that's what's been programmed into us and over years of wrongdoings, or is it really not safe? I think that's one thing that we need to look at. Some people will need to look at their individual health situations. They obviously have shown in the UK that people that have severe allergic reactions to things can possibly have a bigger reaction to being vaccinated, but they also showed that it was able to be controlled within a very, very short period of time.
Okay.
They need to look at
that scared me a little bit when I heard that. I thought my son is, you know, allergic to shellfish and nuts, and he has to carry an EpiPen, and I was like, so here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I carry one myself, if that makes you feel any better. I have allergic reactions to things and carry an EpiPen with me every day. But I did get the vaccine, and I was able to get the vaccine with, you know, I had some issues the next day that I'm not 100% sure might not be related to me being old, but you know.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Let's go real slow here, right? Because I want people to be fully aware, understanding you're a medical professional, you're in the field, who knows what the procedure will look like when it comes to the public. But what was your experience? You know, you go in to get the vaccine. Were you like, did you have a choice to take it?
Yes.
You had a choice.
And I still have a choice. I have a second injection that has to occur at the beginning of January. And if I decide I don't want to do it, I have the right to say no.
So when they said, you know what, Dr. Freeman, the vaccine's here, you want to do this or what? What's up? You ready? And you was like, me? Or you were like, let me talk to my husband, like, let me see.
No, so I'm gonna tell you what I did. I actually went to the Health and Human Services website and was looking for things related to vaccine trials. And it pointed you in a few directions. If you want to do this trial, call this number, sign up here, put your information in. And they actually called me. Or sent me an email rather and say, are you still interested in doing a trial for this purpose? They send you all of the information, 28 pages of information. In my opinion, a little copious. I think it's necessary to cover all the legal hurdles, but I do think that when we're thinking about informed consent and giving people information, we have to be prepared to give that information at the level that can be understood by everyone. I have a little bit of a different background, so I'm flipping through those 28 pages and in 10 minutes, I'm done. You know, the average person isn't going to maybe be able to do that. And I think they have to be prepared, but they are prepared. So when you're reading through that information, once you come on site, they go through the information page by page again with you. Do you have any questions? Do you understand what's being said? I had some questions here and there just because the language wasn't clear, in my opinion. They answered those questions sufficiently, so I decided to move forward. After that occurred, I had to do a brief physical. They checked my blood pressure, checked for any medical history that may be concerning, took a pregnancy test, you know, to make sure.
That would have been a surprise, right? Like,
exactly. I was like, no worries. So, you know, all of these things they did to make sure that in giving me the vaccine, I would be safe. And so once all of those things cleared, I did leave out a step. They did take a swab of my nose to make sure that I wasn't currently infected with COVID-19 because, as you know, it can present asymptomatically and have no symptoms. They took some blood as well, which they'll be using for the purposes of their research. And then they came and gave me the vaccine. But it's important to know that I don't know whether or not I have the vaccine or whether I have the placebo. So I don't know if I'm in the vaccine group or if I'm in the control group.
And of course, just for folks that, you know, the very little I remember from biology at Mount Vernon High School is that they don't tell you, right? They don't tell you which one you're in, and you won't. Will you ever know, or will they'll tell you at the end of the study of the trial?
They will tell you at the end of the trial, but just FYI, the trial is 2 years long, 24 months.
Wow. Okay.
But there's some options in there. Of course, I can back out of the trial, in which case they'll unblind my information and let me know which group I'm in.
Okay.
In addition to that, they did not prohibit me going to get tested myself to see if I already have antibodies. I specifically asked. I was like, if I want to find out whether I have antibodies and I'm willing to go get tested myself, can I? And they were like, well, it's not prohibited in the study, but we don't recommend it, being that they don't want me to be influenced by the information that I may have.
Got it. So you got the, it's a shot?
It is a shot.
Vaccine is a shot?
It's an intramuscular, right in the top of your arm, just very similar to a flu shot.
Okay. You get the shot, and were you scared?
No, I wasn't bothered. I'm very much a vaccine advocate. Took the shot, did a lot of reading about the composition of the shot, made sure I was comfortable with that, and was fine. After the shot was given, I had to wait for about 15 to 30 minutes. And the whole reason for that is to make sure that you're not going to have a reaction.
The reactions, right.
And that's static for any type of vaccine when you're given. My daughter now, when she goes to get her allergy injections, they say, oh, Ms. Freeman, wait in the lobby. We have to make sure she doesn't have a reaction to this. So that's just standard for pretty much anything that you may have to take or be injected with. And I waited for 15 minutes. I went home. They called a couple of days later, asked me how I was doing, said fine. I have a electronic diary that I'm keeping just in case there are things that are odd. And
is that for you, or did they ask you to do that?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then I have another shot 29 days after the first shot. So that will be the last one. After that, I have to go in for subsequent blood draws, and they'll take blood, and that'll be used as part of their vaccine trial. The information garnered, they will be used as part of the trial. Okay.
So you got the shot. I'm going back because I want to make sure that people know what to expect, with their body, what did it hurt. 24 hours after you got the shot, what were you going through? What did you feel? I'm sure you were super aware of what your body was going through. What were you feeling?
I felt fine. I had some soreness in my arm where they gave me the shot. I actually had that soreness probably a little bit longer than I would have expected. When I've gotten vaccines in the past, maybe 3 days tops. It was close to 7 days before that soreness actually went away.
Okay.
A little bit after 24 hours, I did get some weird tingling in my fingers. Went away within 15, 20 minutes or so. And I did have some issues with restlessness and not sleeping, but I don't know if any of those things are really the shot or, based on what I do for a profession, my mind is always going. And so it's not uncommon for me to wake up in the middle of the night working on things. So it's really just hard to tell. But the way that the vaccine people kind of wanted me to give the information is if I was experiencing something for 2 or more days consistently, that's when they wanted to hear from me that there was a problem. So I didn't have anything for 2 or more days other than the arm pain.
Now, I didn't ask this before, but when you went to the HHS website to sign up for the trial, could anybody sign up? Could I go and sign up right now?
You absolutely can. As far as I know.
I'm just saying. If I wanted to.
Michael, we are trying to educate the people.
Sorry. You're changing my mind. I'm sorry.
Anybody can go give the information, submit your email address, and they'll contact you, reach out to you.
And I asked that because and I'm just being real, right? I'm trying to think of myself in those shoes, right? So I go and sign up for this trial. Me, not Dr. Mike, but just me, Mike, a regular person. And I go to get this trial, and I experience tingling in my fingers. I'm like, that's it. Take me now, Lord, it's over. Because those are things that, as a regular person, I would feel a way about that.
They have a hotline for you to call.
Okay.
And you can talk to the nurse immediately, and hopefully they'll be able to walk you through any concerns. I do want to kind of step back a little bit. So I am doing the vaccine trial through a vaccine center. It's not the company that created the vaccine that's handling the trial. It is a separate research company that is doing the work for them.
Okay, so that's good. So that's another line of checks,
another layer.
Like checks and balances, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. So, someone asked, and this was a great question, and it's actually Francis from another JMU. Shout out JMU. Asked about, do you see this being a vaccine that we'd have to take every year? Right, and because I didn't find this out till I was preparing to meet with you, that they like COVID been around, like COVID been in the hood. Like when did this is a strain of COVID that just went a little crazy?
Yeah. So the irony in this is I was involved in SARS-1 when SARS-1 happened. SARS-2 is very similar from a genetic makeup, from a DNA, RNA makeup. SARS-2 is very similar to SARS-1. And so some of the information that we know about SARS-2, COVID, comes from what we knew and what we learned about SARS-1. So that's good. You know, you got to try to find the silver linings in all of this. But between SARS-1 and SARS-2 was another thing called MERS. I don't know if you recall hearing about MERS.
Yeah, I remember.
They're all part of the same family of viruses, but coronaviruses in general are known to infect people and animals. There are quite a few different subtypes of coronaviruses, and not all of them can infect people. We have, I believe, 6 or 7, don't quote me on that, I believe 6 or 7 that can infect humans. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with right now.
Okay. So you got the shot, you feel some things after a few days, you're completely back to normal. The soreness in the arm is gone. And that's it. And so now you go back in a month or so to get the second shot. Now, do you have to take that second shot? Like, is that a part of the
Yes. So to remain in the trial, you do have to take that second shot. But everything is always optional. And so if you choose to no longer participate, and we can maybe talk later or at another time about some of the ethical considerations about people not knowing whether they got the vaccine or the placebo. But I can choose at any time to forego participation and come out. I do want to wrap back because I think I didn't answer one of your questions. It is likely going to be expected that we're going to have to take this every year. So what we know,
really? Okay.
What we know from SARS-1 and SARS-2 appears to be acting the same is that the antibodies typically don't tend to be long-term.
Okay, antibodies. Okay, got it.
So the antibodies we're creating after a certain period of time, they'll go away. And so what the vaccine developers have done is created a scheme to use that will hopefully extend that time frame. So hopefully maybe for a whole year, maybe. We don't know. That's what the trials are for. You should hopefully still have antibody development, but it's likely it will be at least a yearly vaccine.
Wow. And I think I saw Jathita just asked about, what's up, Jet? You know, the JMU in the building. Is there I missed a couple questions, but is there any indication that schools will make this mandatory? You know, there's certain vaccines that kids have to have.
Yeah, I don't have any indication of that right now. I think the focus from the circles that I've been in has really been how right now do we effectively and quickly distribute the vaccine to have the most impact. And so those are the conversations. But it's also important to remember that children have not been tested in these trials. So to be in these trials, you have to be 18 and older.
Okay.
And in trial phases, once you determine that people with conditions won't be negatively impacted, regular adults and a mixture of adults won't be negatively impacted, they then go to look at children and pregnant women because they're considered vulnerable populations. And so that testing will take place later. So at this point, the vaccine isn't even approved yet for anyone under the age of 18.
I read something today about some side effects for, I think it's at 14 to 16-year-olds in the UK or something like that just things that they're seeing. Someone on the thread asked about, this is Maya BG, I don't know who that is, but she asked a very sciencey question.
Of course she did. I know Maya BG.
You know Maya? She says, I'm wondering about the mRNA technology as it relates to the blood-brain barrier. I'm going to ask the question like I know what she's talking about. What are your thoughts on that? Is it possible for the proteins to travel, or is it too fragile to last?
So at this point, there's no indication that the proteins will travel. So that's
what does that mean? Tell me. I have no idea what that question is.
So I'm trying to figure out a way to break down a really complicated process into something that I can say in layman's terms. But basically, what they've done is taken some of the genetic material, and that's the mRNA that she's talking about, and they've put it inside of a bubble. Kind of think of a protein bubble. And so that's what's being injected into you. Basically what happens is that bubble attaches to your blood cells or your body's cells, and the mRNA is absorbed into your cells.
Okay.
That mRNA is then activated in a series of steps to make your cells show the proteins of coronavirus, because that's what is happening in natural infection. Your body is recognizing that the coronavirus is there. So it's pushing your cells to show these little fragments of a chemical that says there's something here that's not supposed to be here. You need to kind of kick into gear and start working.
Got it. Okay, I got it. So, okay, go ahead.
So that little bubble that I was talking about gets absorbed. Okay. And once your cells start showing those little chemicals of the coronavirus that kick it into gear, it's going to start fighting those things immediately. And so there should be no transfer of those particles and of those proteins across the blood-brain barrier.
Because you don't want there to be is that it? Like you don't want there to be protein in the barrier?
No, I mean, you never want anything in your blood-brain barrier. It's considered a sterile environment.
Okay.
So when you hear people have encephalitis and meningitis, it's because something that isn't supposed to be there got there.
So that's why that question is so important. I see. That made me think of a question, then I lost it. There have been quite a few. I did some non-research-based polling via the scientific platforms of Facebook and Instagram. And I asked people.
Very scientific.
All the data is there. I just asking people, like, are you going to take the vaccine? Right? Like, what in 2021, are you going to take the vaccine? And most people said no. Most people said no by like 60-40. It wasn't like a huge barrier, maybe even like 55-45. Can you say anything that would change people's mind? Is that the role? Like, okay, let me real quick tangent.
There's a lot of questions in there, Mike.
I know. I've always thought that in the United States, when it comes to medicine and the people, there needs to be a translator, right? Like, I love Fauci because what he does is he's translate depending on what station he's on, if he's on ESPN or if he's on, like, he's able to break it down. But what can you say to like change people's minds? Whose role is it? Is it the epidemiologist? Is it the doctor? Is it the news? Is it, our primary care physician? Like, how do we change people's minds if that's what we want to do?
In this rapid, Operation Warp Speed is, what they're calling it, in this rapid progression to vaccine development and administration, we skipped over some steps. And those steps, not just related to the vaccine development, because I have confidence that, as I said earlier, this is old technology, virus, but the steps that we skipped over that answer your question are the steps about education of the community. There are whole platforms whenever vaccines are coming onto the market or being given each year that are aimed at educating people about the virus. We skipped that. In addition to that, a lot of times the epidemiologists will reach out to community leaders and say, hey, we need you on board with us. Help us convince your communities that this is a thing to do. We have skipped over that as well.
Dang, okay.
So there are pieces and parts to the whole process that are necessary, that are working in the background. So when you say whose responsibility is it, it really is all of our responsibility.
Okay.
Even for the people who are coming from a place of not knowing, it's even their responsibility to say, how do I find out? And where can I get the information? It's our responsibility as medical professionals to be sure that the messaging is appropriate so it can be understood by not just me and talking to my peers, but by you and the average person walking down the street and my mom who's almost 80 years old. And it needs to be understood by all. And so I really feel that what you've done tonight is really important, and I have to give you kudos for breaking the situation open and hopefully allowing us to have an honest conversation and learn where to find the information or who to ask.
Yeah, we have about, I want to keep us to about, an hour. If we need to go a little bit further, I know we both got kids probably waiting outside the door for us. But you went into something, we talked about Instagram and Facebook and social media, where a lot of us get our information from. No judgment or shame. But again, to make the parallel with education, right? I'm a lifelong educator. I worked at every level of education, from higher ed to pre-K, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll see people making statements on education online. See, I'm not as reserved as you, Dr. Freeman. And so people make statements. I'll be like, yo, what are you talking about? You are crazy. That's wrong. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. But it's two things to acknowledge. One, when people feel something deeply, it's like the facts don't matter, right? And it takes for a person with patience and special grace to insert themselves and say like, hey guys, like I have some information here. And that's really what I've seen you do really well, is how you engage with people that were like, when you say vaccine, people are like, I ain't doing that shit. Like, people get really crazy about it. What is your take on how to engage people online?
So if I have to repeat something my grandmother used to tell me, she would say, just because you have something to say doesn't mean everybody wants to hear it, right?
Okay. And I need your grandma to tell that to me 3 more times.
That was her way of saying, you might be right in what it is that you have to say right now, but until someone's ready to hear you, you're wasting your time. And so what I work really hard to do is to become a master of timing and trying to figure out when people will be receptive to information so that it can be absorbed and used in the most beneficial manner possible. I try to do it from a place of grace, right? Because God showed us grace, and who am I not to show that to someone else? I try to be patient with people and trust. There are some days where I'm sitting here at my computer like,
yes. Right.
And I just, swipe left and keep it moving. So it's not to say that I don't get frustrated.
To swipe left.
Swipe up, swipe down, do whatever you got to do. It's hard sometimes to ignore it. My husband, when we're having a conversation in the morning, he's sometimes like, it's okay, bring it down. Everybody doesn't know what you know. And so that keeps me grounded and that keeps me checked. But I'm a human. I get upset, I get angry, but I also am smart enough to know that you have to meet people where they are. You have to acknowledge that their feelings are real and that their vantage points are real. And the only thing you can do is hopefully give them information that will benefit them and our society, as a whole, because I feel strongly that vaccines need to be looked at as a way to create equity in our community, right?
Wow, okay.
We're in a triangulation. We have a health crisis, we have a social justice crisis, and we have a financial crisis. If we want to get healthy, we may need this vaccine. If we want to make sure that we can continue making money and can go to work, we may need this vaccine. And if we want our African American communities to be on the same level as everyone else, we may need to get this vaccine. And so, that's kind of how I look at it. And I'm hoping other people can begin to see it that way also. And it's not to say that there aren't some people that should have some reservations. I've seen some research on people who have neurological diseases, MS and things like that. They may want to hold off for now, or have conversations with their doctors and get good medical advice before they jump into this. But Don't do it from a place of being afraid or not having information. And if at the end of the day, you still make the choice not to get the vaccine, that's okay too. But I know that I've done, and you'll know that you've done what you could to help educate the people around you.
Yeah, that is, along with, of course, everything you said, I think that is so important because that is where the people are, right? The people are exactly where you just stated, right? Like they're in a state of not knowing. Like we don't know as much. That's what we were talking about a few days ago. Like, I don't know everything you know. So when I first, like just hearing vaccine as a Black man, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not an anti-vaxxer on any level, but my thing was just give it a little bit of time, right? But we don't have time in the sense of like, I'm gonna wait like 3 or 4 years to see what happens with the first trial and the second trial.
But let me tell you something, Mike. So I'm in a vaccine trial and I'm in a very controlled setting. They're checking on me, sending me emails. I have a journal. When the vaccine is released and people start getting it then and they say, well, I'm gonna wait, guess what you're doing? You're still in a trial. You're still in a trial.
True.
But you're in a trial in an uncontrolled
unprotected trial. Right.
So I'd rather do it this way. And that's kind of why I decided, to do this.
That's a really good point. I never thought about it like that. And I also never thought about those steps that were missing, right? The steps, like who's talking to the community leaders? Like, where are the commercials? Where I saw a couple commercials here and there, but like where, I think we spent the first 3 or 4 months like, is this real? Like, I don't know. Maybe. Should we close the schools? So, man, it's definitely a time. I'm looking through, what time is it? It's 9:23. I don't want to hold people too long, but I'm just reading through some comments. What's up, Toya? I see you out there, Zafia. I see you, Justina. JMU's representing big time.
Yes.
Avis Thomas asked, hey, there was an article recently where researchers were warning of the possible increase of the risk of being, hold on, I gotta reread this. There was an article recently where researchers were warning of the possible increase of the risk of being susceptible to HIV infection due to some of the COVID-19 vaccines being AD5 vector vaccines. I don't know what that is. What is your take?
So I'm going to be honest, I have not read that article.
Okay.
And I would hesitate to comment on it without reading it.
Sure.
So, there are a few things when you're reading articles, you have to be careful of being sure that they come from reputable sources.
Okay.
That the literature is peer reviewed. I'm not very big on regular news and I don't watch it. I try to go to my journals. I try to go to my authoritative sources to get information. I'm not saying that this is definitely not, I don't know. I honestly don't know, but I can definitely do some research and post some stuff under the site later because it'll be up for a little bit to answer the question.
Okay. Okay. So thank you for doing that. Good question. Let's see. What in closing, Marilyn, like, what now? Like, what do we do? And again, we've been focusing on Black people, Black folks, African American folks, because all the reasons we talked about earlier, right? What's next for us? Like these next few, we're still in the storm, right? But what should we be doing now when it comes to COVID and when it comes to the vaccine?
So as it comes to COVID, I think we're going to still be needing to take those same precautions, washing our hands, staying 6 feet away from someone, not gathering in large groups, wearing your mask. We're going to be doing that for a while until we get the majority of the population vaccinated. Okay. As it relates to the vaccine, what I would really love for people to do is let this conversation spark some interest in you to get more information if you're sitting on the fence. Because, we have a group of people that are like, I'm getting the vaccine and I'm good. We have some people that are like, I'm not getting the vaccine and that's fine too. But there's some people that are sitting on the fence and really don't know. And so if we haven't answered your questions here, go find the information, DM me, drop something under this particular link for the call tonight, for the Zoom tonight, and I will answer whatever there is. I just think it's really important that people work hard to protect themselves.
Okay. Marilyn, thank you so very much. We're gonna stay on for a few minutes. We'll shoot the breeze, just go through the questions, make sure we answered everybody's. Oh, someone asked, I didn't get to this. Danielle Marlissa. Oh, that's Danielle. That's another JMU represent. She asked, can we talk a little more about the antibody test versus the vaccine?
Okay. So the antibody test is a little bit different from the vaccine. So the antibody test is a test that a laboratory can do to determine whether or not your body has made antibodies to the vaccine. So they give you the vaccine.
Okay.
Your body, in theory, should create antibodies. And if you want to know whether or not it did or it didn't, you can get an antibody test. And that antibody test will tell you, yes, you created that antibodies and you have an immune response and you should be protected.
Okay, hold on, I missed that. Because I thought that the antibody test was a part of the COVID test to see if you've been exposed. Is that right?
It's one of two.
Okay,
so there are two tests for COVID-19, actually 3 tests for COVID-19. The first one that came on board was what we call a PCR test. And that looks for the virus itself or the genetic material that the virus is creating. The second test that came on board was an antibody test.
Yes.
The antibody test does not look for the virus. It looks for the antibodies that you have created in response to being infected at one point in time with the virus.
Okay, so you would only have the antibodies if you had COVID at some point.
In theory. Mm-hmm.
In theory, okay.
Nothing's 100%.
Okay, right. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, excellent. So and then a part of the vaccine is injecting you with the antibodies. No.
Is injecting you with a little bit of what we call it an invader. Let's just call it an invader. So it injects you with something that invades your body so that your body recognizes it as foreign, and then your body will actually produce antibodies to fight it. Okay.
And it doesn't, this is what I've been meaning to ask all night because a few people have said this. Does the vaccine alter you in any way in terms of, does it change your DNA? Does it add, are you going to have another ear growing out your cheek?
No. What they've done with the vaccine is identified a little segment of the RNA that is only related to the spike protein that coronavirus makes. So it will use your own system to create that fake spike protein, and once it's made, it's done. Nothing else happens.
That's it.
That's it. All it needed was that little bit of a kick to say something is here that shouldn't be here. We need to fight it.
Okay.
And that's kind of what happens. There was a question that Akiba had yesterday. Hopefully I can get it in before we cut off. About if I have a adverse reaction, what can I do? You have 2 options. You can sue, of course, but there also is on the HRSA website a National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. That if you have an adverse event and you don't want to sue, they've created a way that you can be compensated if you have an adverse event. Okay,
excellent. Yeah, I remember that question that Kiva asked. And Joy just came on, another JMU shout out. We got to shout out Lambda Chi. We got to shout out Zaidi. We got to shout out all the alphas and AKs watching from JMU and beyond. But Joy asked, she talked about allergies. I think we mentioned that earlier, maybe before she came on. People with significant allergies should be careful when considering the vaccine. Do you have any information about that? If you hear anything, please share in the future. She just gave us some thanks for doing what we're doing. Allergies. You have allergies, you said?
I do.
Okay. And from what we know, there's no adverse reaction.
They have a couple of people that had a small reaction. It's not what they would classify as being adverse.
Okay.
Adverse are those reactions that are really going to take you out, take you down, cause really, really big issues. They were able to resolve them within a matter of minutes. They're saying 15 minutes to 30 minutes. They were able to treat the people and get them back and moving forward.
Okay. Excellent.
More information as the trials go on. We'll see.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Marilyn, this is so informative for me, just asking questions that I've been pondering, and the folks that asked questions were some that I've been thinking of as well. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. You make science like human, and you make it like it's a humanity issue, it's a social issue, and there are not very many scientists I know, and I know a couple that are able to talk about it the way you do and way you have. And that is really where the gold is, right? That's the treasure. When people can speak languages across their professions into other and reach different people, like that's magic. And so I really, the reason why I wanted to talk to you is because I saw how you interact with people online, and with the grace that you talked about, it's really dope. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm gonna, we could link up again in like a few months.
Yeah, we can see if I'm still alive in 30 days.
Don't say don't. And we once we get to the point where we can see a light, and the vaccine is out there, maybe
I'll be the first to let you know.
We'll link up again and let the people know what's going on. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I think you can sleep safe tonight. Sixth Symphony isn't gonna come for your neck.
Let me look. You saw me sweating. Let me see. Where's Sixth Symphony at? And where's Shauna? Where are they at? I know they're on here clocking. They're probably about to report me to Mark Zuckerberg. Like, nah, cancel, cut his butt. Thank you so much. Thank everybody so much for tuning in, and we're gonna continue just shifting the narrative, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. It's been fun.
See ya. Thanks, Carol.